Welcome to another episode of VNture podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Emar, and together with Tauros, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. A new chapter of the podcast starts, 105th first episode, just as the May ends. It's time to reflect on the things we've read. So Tauros, what kind of a new title did you read? And will you possibly mention Fate again?
I was about to say, although we are sort of in a new era after passing the 100 episode milestone mark, on the other hand, some things will always stay the same, such as MR ribbing me about always bringing up Fate's Day Night. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, huh, buddy?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But speaking of which, and why I'm mentioning it, is that I've finally gotten around to reading a title that has been on my backlog for a while now, and that is Witch on the Holy Night from Type Moon. From here on out, I'm also going to be referring to it shorthand as Mahoyo, since that's basically its Japanese abbreviation name. Mahoyo is a very interesting title. There's a lot of good parts, but unfortunately some lacking aspects to it as well. The story and the premise is in line with Type Moon works. There are two main characters. One is Aoko, who is a high school girl who is also living her double life as a magician and learning the magics. The other main character is Sojuro, who is a pretty not quite normal high school boy. He has spent his whole life living up in the country, isolated in the mountains in his small little village, and who is now living in a city, transferring into high school, and he gets into all sorts of strange misunderstandings about how modern society works after living in the country his whole life. Aoko and Sojuro wind up crossing paths, and the very interesting ways that develop and the other threats attacking the city lead to many interesting scenarios. It is an urban fantasy visual novel, and what is most impressive about Mahoyo are the production qualities. Oh my goodness, I've heard everyone who's read this visual novel praise the production qualities so much, but it isn't until I've read this title that I kind of realized just how bonkers they are. The art is incredible, just obviously, as you could tell from some of the images scrolling by on the background, is that the artist truly went all out, creating so many detailed CGs, so many incredible backgrounds, very detailed sprites. They also utilize so many, tricks and techniques that you don't see in a typical visual novel. Do you remember, MR, in Muv-Luv Extra, how you had the sprites, but there weren't just two static spots for the sprites to be on in the foreground? In Muv-Luv Extra, those sprites would slide around on the background. Sometimes they would shrink down and, alter this perspective so that it looked like they were far off in the distance. You'd have some characters... Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, that was one of the best parts of Muv-Luv, due to how expressive the sprites were and how unafraid they were to mess around with them. Sometimes they were far away, sometimes they close in, emulating someone who's running towards you. Mm-hmm. They were very, very animated.
Yes, they're animated in the sense that, they have movement. They bob up and down when they're running. There's two characters, they slide off to the right side of the screen to show that they're moving or they're walking across town. I love how you mentioned the expressions, because Mahoyo also has so many expressions for the characters that also add to the liveliness of these scenes. Not only that, but there are many times where this VN utilizes CGs. And I don't mean CGs as the big ol' huge illustration for a climatic moment. I also mean just utilizing a simple shots, like Aoko sitting cross-legged on a couch. Instead of her normal standing sprite that you see other visual novels typically use, Mahoyo will move the camera around on this one CG to make it fresh the whole time. And it uses cinematography tricks, such as, coming in from the top, or just holding a static shot on like the right side of it, in so many ways to just make this one image feel like it's being used 50 times over in very creative manners. Like, one of the little things that you can't often see in a review that speaks to how incredible Mahoyo is with its production values is that when the visual novel starts in chapter 1, it deliberately keeps the frame out of the eyes of the characters. We start with Aoko as she wakes up in the morning and gets ready for her day, and in all of the shots, it keeps her eyes out of frame. It focuses on a lower body shot as she's walking to school. We see scenes of her back to the camera as she looks over at the city. Even when she's talking to a teacher, we still always see over the shoulder shots from her perspective, and we very deliberately don't see her eyes. And then there's Sojiro, the other protagonist, as from his perspective, and once again, the VN keeps his eyes out of frame. And it's not until they meet and you get the big dramatic opening, then the visual novel finally releases that tension, and it just shows them in all their glory. It's the little things like that when the VN opens like that and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm watching an anime here. There's so much movement, so many camera tricks that it makes you somewhat forget that you're primarily reading the text on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time when we get that dissonance, you read VN, and the VN says that the other character is disgruntled. You look at the sprite, it's the most neutral face ever, right? I mean, you've read those for sure, right?
Of course.
And then you read something that truly you didn't even think about such an trick or animation to incorporate. And the way you describe Mahoyo reminded me about Maitetsu. Maitetsu had a lot of care put into animation and the camera tricks. Mm-hmm. A simple example, greeting. In Japan, people bow, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a greeting of what that main character greets another by bowing, and the entire camera just goes down a bit. I'm like, what happened? Oh wait, he's bowing. Obviously, his point of view descends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because you are reading, or at least you are seeing everything from the eye point of the protagonist. So when he bows down, then the camera lowers. When he meets shorter character and there is written that he kneels to talk to them to the face, right? Mm-hmm. Again, the same things happen. The camera lowers appropriately.
Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of elements of those that show up in Mahoyo as well. And, for me, who never knew this was coming, this was quite a shock. And I was like, oh my goodness, how was this released back in 2014 when this is showing up titles even nowadays in 2024? Mm-hmm. And of course, Mahoyo also has so many animations. And I mean this, not quite as in the animated sprite movement, but I just mean legitimately movie clips. I have some of them scrolling in the background if you're watching on YouTube. And these are not just cherry picked out of the biggest, the hype scenes and whatnot. Mahoyo has minute to minute utilizes animations and clips of just, sometimes they're simple, elements in the foreground moving independently from the background elements, so that it really seems like you're zooming out or you're zooming in. Other times you get custom illustrations of the characters sliding across the screen for action, like how Muv-Luv Alternative really handled it. And then other times you just get entirely custom elements and it's just going balls to the wall. I am still stunned at just how pretty Witch on the Holy Night is. with all the action, all the movement, all of the production qualities. I really mean it when I said, like, there are several times during this VN I'm wondering, I'm half convinced I'm starting to watch an anime. Like the best of both worlds. You get the writing from the visual novel of, reading words from the script, and you also get the liveliness that you see out of the camera work in an anime.
True. I mean, if I go back and talk about Fate, and the fights, such as on the Fate route, that comes to my mind every single time, the way they used all the tricks to make it as flash as possible, of how every single time clash on metal light up the forest, is something that I remember forever. And the way you describe Mahoyo means like they stepped up their game and went even further beyond to sell those dynamic action scenes.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's kind of funny because we tried to present, this is a bit talking behind the scenes. When I first talked about Amatsutsumi, I also prepared some clips about how animation quality in that title added to eerie atmosphere. But for some reason, those assets didn't load on that episode, right? But in that particular title, they put a lot of effort in animating those innocuous moments, like snowflakes falling down around a character, or water falling down, like those kind of background things. But they did so well to add to the atmosphere of the moment in Amatsutsumi. Here, as I'm looking at the animation you extracted for this episode, those tends to be on the action-packed side, right? To sell on the spectacle.
Much of it is in the action, but like I said, another strong, incredulous point for Witch on the Holy Night is that there are so many of them for non-action parts. For just the normal everyday life, for the tension rising, for the mystery parts. I had wondered to myself, man, if other visual novels had like 1 minute of Witch on the Holy Night for their big climactic, ending, people would be all hype about that. Readers would love it. And then you just have Witch on the Holy Night over here just pumping out that level of quality nonstop. I'm like, how the hell is this sustainable?
Oh, man.
With all of that said about its production qualities, and I could gush about it forever, but still, there are some problems with Mahoyo, and honestly, its story took away quite a bit from my enjoyment, and I really wish I could have enjoyed this more, but I can't. The first half of Witch on the Holy Night is great. It serves up the premise. We get the characters introduced. They're pretty unique in their behaviors and their outlooks. And then it builds to like a very big Act 1 climax. And everything flowed greatly. And I was so happy. I was so pumped. I was like, oh my goodness, we are in for a ride. This is going to be great. But then halfway through Mahoyo, things just fall apart. The plot just kind of runs out of steam and forgets what it's doing. And we get so much of what I felt were like pointless scenes. I don't think they really took the characters anywhere. I don't think they really advanced any sort of conflict. In fact, that's kind of the biggest problem, is that it had the conflict set up from its Act 1 climax. It had a direction for it to go, and then it kind of simply didn't raise the tension at all. The story meandered about doing all sorts of other unrelated introspective moments, but without a goal. And it really took away from me. And when we get to the end of Witch of the Holy Night, as it's building up, trying to build up something, it felt so disconnected from me. And I'm wondering where any of these developments are coming from. It's like when you have all of the cake dressing and you've got all the fancy elements and stuff, but you don't have the foundation. It's just you only have like half a centimeter of actual cake to it, and then you just got piles of frosting.
Okay. I like the analogy. And
Uh-huh.
obviously, it's very hard for me to press for specifics because obviously you don't want to spoil, right? But I'll ask it this way. Did you feel around the middle point that the central conflict dissipates and it meanders aimlessly from that point? Is that what you're trying to say?
Somewhat, yeah. I don't like holding every title to one central conflict because even though that's simple and it's effective and it works for many titles, some titles build on that. They explore, they branch out a little, and I'm very generous about that. You go, and that's how you get some aspects like an Act 1 plot, and then you have like an Act 2, and then it leads to like an Act 3, and they're all distinct but interconnected. There's plenty of titles that can do that right. MaHoYo feels like it has some overarching elements, but it mostly ignores those elements, and then it has some, immediate in the moment aspects, but then it kind of drops the ball and doesn't really think anything of it, and like I said, it doesn't offer any obstacles. It just kind of zooms from the middle to the end. But like I said, in the meantime, we're still having a whole bunch of introspective slice of life scenes that I'm reading and I'm not really sure where are going anywhere. Like, I'm gonna say it with Fate Stay Night, you have the cooking scenes. You have all of the times the main characters are lounging around in the house, but at least those have a purpose. Those are meant to break up the pacing. It's supposed to be somewhat of battle plans and info dumping about the Holy Grail War they're partaking in. You can't just have the whole thing be nonstop action. It's so you have the action and then you have the resting and recouping and lore dumping.
I mean, and it kind of fits with the theme of peaceful days and very eventful nights that Fate went with.
Yes. So then you have Witch on the Holy Night, but they don't have, in my opinion, it didn't feel like it had that Holy Grail War danger running in the background that Fate Stay Night did. So instead, you just have these normal, lackadaisical scenes, and I'm wondering, well, what is the point of this? Where are we going? I feel like there should be something, and they kind of say there's something, but what the VN says versus what the VN tells me, there's that disconnect,
Okay.
Another big draw is that Fate Stay Night had so much character growth. A lot of it was focused on the characters, and through the events that transpire, we get to see the characters, exert themselves in certain ways. And we see their mindsets so often and how they change and how they evolve from chapter 1 to all the way to the finales of each of the routes. In Witch in the Holy Night, I didn't feel we got that. Which is strange because it spends so much time about the characters and about the introspection. Like, for goodness sake, we get a flashlight shown on Sojiro constantly about how he's a very interesting character. Very much like a pool of still water, of how reflective and introspective and yet somehow a little weird he is. He's such an interesting main character, but like I said, I didn't feel like there was any growth. I think of the last, closing moments of MaHoYo, and I think of its opening, and although the VN's trying to tell me the characters are different, I really don't believe it at all, I don't know. There are many other people who enjoy the title and who don't get hung up on the things like that, and that's great, I'm happy for anyone who enjoyed Witch on the Holy Night. In my case, I was so excited for the chapter, the Act 1 arc. And halfway through, I'm like, oh man, if this VN keeps it up, this is going to be a 9 out of 10 easily. And it simply dropped the ball. It had the ball, and then I'm like, okay, so now you're going to dribble and you're going to style and dunk on it, and it just stood there and it kept holding it. I'm like, Mahoyo, you gonna do anything? No. Okay.
Okay, so did you think this title tried to be deeper than it really is? Was
Try
that part of
to
the problem?
be deeper. I don't think so. I don't think it was like insisting upon itself. In fact, I somewhat think that's kind of the opposite problem, where I think back to the end and it's like, what is the theme of Witch on the Holy Night? What is
Oh,
my
okay, it's not
takeaway
deep
from
enough.
this? And I had no idea. What's the lesson of this in the way that you have like Fate Stay Night? Heck, each of the different routes in Fate Stay Night, whether it's being a hero or being a hero despite the consequences or throwing away your ideals. Even, you have stuff like Muv-Luv Alternative, where it's like the themes of it are about being part of something larger and, the grit and determination to make your dreams a reality. I think back on Mahoyo, and I'm not really sure. I don't know what I was supposed to take away from this story.
Well,
So that it's the sort of thing, it just leaves a frustrating taste in your mouth.
Well, I do have one more question. A very peculiar question, given that we had an expert on the subject recently. So would you say Witch on the Holy Night is witchy?
It is very witchy. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, Aoko is a magician, and I do have to give props for Witch on the Holy Night for having some of the best uses of magic that I've seen in, all the Type Moon works. You have stuff like, Fate Stay Night or Tsukihime, where a lot of the supernatural elements are very combat focused and whatnot. In Witch of the Holy Night, they're still combat focused for, much of it. However, there's a lot of unique aspects, and there's a lot of very interesting methods and twisty ways that these spells and magic and charms take effect. It's very novel, and it's very interesting in ways that, other Type Moon lore-dumping elements aren't.
Okay, there's several questions that spawn from what you just said. Okay, creative magic, right? In a title focused on confrontation. Because it's super easy to talk about magic that just like deals damage, go lightning bolt, fireball, etc.
Fireball.
Yeah. You know the jokes.
Yeah.
But the moment you said that you're impressed by creativity and how it uses magic reminded me how I was impressed by a little title called Little Witch Romanesque. It was about learning magic, and it had premise of using that magic to as a trainee to fulfill some quests, right? And every time you learned a new spell, there was an opportunity to solve another problem. For example, you could utilize fly spell as well as breathing underwater to fight a water serpent or defeat a creature that was roaming across the village. And I felt it was always creative how throughout the story of Little Witch Romanesque, every single time you learn a spell, it was a new opportunity to story progress, because now you have a solution to another problem, and it branches out with those spells. And like that was a creative title that used spells in a story properly, in my opinion. And it just so happened it was very witchy. Okay, I'll get it out of the way. It was very witchy.
Interesting.
So I wonder.
All things considered, Witch on the Holy Night was very fun and entertaining. I really wish that its back half was far more developed, and that there was more character growth. They spent so much time telling me how the characters are, but it didn't really tell us where they are going.
I do have one more question. One more question. Did it feature maybe glossary or some sort of encyclopedia? Because I remember Fate very fondly for its Oh my god, I completely forgot what was the screen describing all the servants, but also the screen that described all the noble phantasms and all the relics. I really
Yeah,
love that
yes.
page.
Fate had that whole glossary
Yeah,
element. I don't think
yeah.
Mahoyo does. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure they don't. No, I didn't see anything. Oh well.
Hey,
That's a point
maybe.
against you in your book, Emlar.
Exactly. Again, magic in Nasuverse is very interesting, so I hope they had some sort of glossary towards that end. But oh well.
So that's what I've been up to the past month. What about you, Emlar?
Listen, I debated internally with myself what to talk about today. I mean, I did progress Amatsutsu. Okay? I had one more route under my belt, and I have a very interesting feedback on that title. But it just so happened that my friend infected me, because there's no other way of saying that, infected me with Chrono Arc. Holy crap. So I need to talk about the title. It is fundamentally, I do believe, more of a game than VN. Okay? So this is a roguelike deck builder. But it has so much VN elements, so much commonalities with a typical VN. I feel like it deserves a spot. Because the way it uses story, it's not dismissible. It is integral to the gameplay in a way I haven't experienced in quite some time, especially in deck builders. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to the premise. You wake up, you read the story from the perspective of a girl of prophecy, and your quest is to turn on the clock tower. That's it, that's all you know. Okay. And against all odds, you achieve that. Hooray, everybody cheers. And then you as a player see how the time rewinds. And you wake up, you have one purpose in your life, you go to the clock tower to activate it. And you kind of live the Groundhog Day. And that's the hook. What the hell is going on? Every single time you have a quest, go do that thing. Time rewinds, go do that thing. Which makes sense. It's a gameplay game that is focused on replayability. It's a roguelike. Okay. You, Lucy, the protagonist of the story, is you are the girl of prophecy. So you basically are the guide. And you recruit investigators who help you throughout those adventures of the Twisted Land. And that's a lot of weirdness going on. It has that Alice in the Wonderland aesthetic or theme to it, I would say. And little by little, you get intrigued. What the hell is going on? Why is looping? Why you keep meeting new people? No one recognizes you. Okay, you win. Time resets. You go again. You have strange dreams. And you slowly piece together. Now, I'll give a little bit of a spoiler. I mean, it's something I quite quickly figure out. And it's quite apparent because the game doesn't hide it that much. It's that it's virtual reality. Right? So it's quite in the name. It's an arc suspended in time. Chrono arc, you would say. So why, how, and for what purpose? What purpose does it serve? Now that's the mystery for you to solve. And throughout the adventure, like I mentioned, you gather investigators who help you activate the clock tower. And you slowly talk to them. You become acquainted with them, gift them gifts, and raise your friendship affection bar. Right? You get the backstory of every single one of them. And everybody mentions some dreams. And every single time there is a dissonance when you hear them talk about both themselves and the dreams. and you slowly build a picture. You play some more, and it's like, damn, this is almost like they're playing D&D. You have for example, there is a priest character that uses a baseball bat. Sorry, holy stuff she calls it, okay? But sometimes in some of her attacks, you can see her smacking people with the baseball bat, okay? Like, And it just so happens that a lot of those people, how can I describe? Given the virtual reality, are living their idolized version of themselves and getting to know them slowly before the big reveal that they will be aware that this is virtual reality. Is such an interesting thing when they come to terms with that's not who they are. There is something special when you have a hardened veteran, a paladin of sorts, a protector of the party leader, that she goes always on the front line, always takes the brunt of the damage, and you learn that she was actually a project manager in real life. Like, it has that MMO feel to it.
Yeah, that whole distinction between your online persona versus who you really are.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a guy who is mad, like Chunibyo mad, glowing eye, blood sword, all that thing. And in the dreams, he keeps dreaming like, there's a deadline and he needs to fix bugs. I'm like, oh my god. It's an IT developer if I ever heard it. Oh my god, I was dying laughing.
But you said that you're not entirely convinced this is a visual novel, and you debated with yourself over talking about it today. Why is that?
Yes. Because fundamentally, it is more game than VM. But and it does advertise itself as a role-playing deck builder roguelike. But to me, it has so much story in it. There's so many events, talking points. CGs are out of. I did not expect this to have so many CGs, so many variants. It also has how can I say it? It's not necessarily a backlog, but you have access to the database at some point, and you can see past memories of all the characters. You can have view recordings and data logs. There's so much going on. I was overwhelmed. I did not expect approaching a game about card slinging, counting mana, and drawing cards to be that intensive in a story. And to be honest, I'm very very careful about spoilers. Some of them were really good and caught me off guard completely. Some of them, I anticipated. Okay, I knew where they were going, but some of them were like, whoa, that's deep. And given the themes of being trapped in a virtual reality, having to live through loops on and on and on again with your memories reset, but not necessarily subconscious being reset, that story went places, okay? It even didn't shy away from having very dark moments at times when necessary. And I am impressed, I'll be honest. Now, the biggest thing that broke me when it comes to deciding to talk about it, okay? Because we can talk about gameplay, we can talk about story, right? But I feel the one thing that this title does the best is bring them together. So I recall in a gameplay episode, when we talked about gameplay in VNs, you brought up an aspect of what makes a good gameplay VM is when the gameplay isn't separated from the story. So whatever gameplay fills the role of isn't superseded by the event after that. So it's not like you're playing a gameplay segment, then you win the gameplay segment, but you lost in the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this title does it super well. So many times you keep reading the story segment, and then you transition into in the middle of the game, and then you have to perform the moves that are described in the story, and or depending on how you do them, the story progresses differently. That's what I want, even more. Especially since you read the story, they are wandering in the forest, they run into a typical boss. But in this story segment, it was introduced, so it was a witch that curses you. And one of the opening moves the witch does is it creates your card, it curses one of your party members. And they say it. Yeah, okay, let's focus on this. This is a boss, we need to somehow manage that. Come on, give me a curse, let's do this stuff. And you see personalities of those characters represented. Like, I was so impressed. Yeah, the gameplay to story feedback loop was amazing in this title.
So overall, you say you'd enjoyed Chrono Arc?
Yeah. I am addicted. I can't stop. Sorry, Amatsutsumi. I will get back to Amatsutsumi, I promise.
Someday. We're
Someday.
month after month, it's like we are continuing the Amatsutsumi train.
Okay, I did not think this title would suck me in so hard. It was so good. I mean, it still is. I haven't finished it yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, best of luck to it then.
Thank you. And with that, I think this is time to end the episode. Thank you very much for all our listeners. And thank you once more again, Taurus. Take care.
You too, and thank you everyone for listening in. I hope you enjoyed. VNture out.
VNture out.